Second Kings. We're going to finish chapter 4 and go into chapter 5. So I'll probably finish chapter 4 quickly because I really want to get to chapter 5. All right. Now, last week we looked at chapter 4 and we saw we had looked at God, my brain had just fell out of my head, even though I've got it right here in front of me. I apologize. But we saw the Shunammite lady in the loss of her child. We talked about Gehazi and wanted to remind you of him because he wanted to thrust the Shunammite lady off of Elisha as she clung to his feet. Remember, that was the verb to be strong. So she was this isn't the cleave. This is like she is. This is a mama bear not letting go kind of idea. And so Elisha went and raised the Shunammite son back to life. God worked a miracle there. And so we saw how that, we also discussed how that seeming really distressing time and experience in her life was actually used by God to bring about a blessing later after the end of a famine. You know, that was a story that was brought to the king's attention by Gehazi as the Shunammite returned after a famine and was seeking to have her lands restored. And the king heard that story and received it well and made sure that she got her land back and that also she was compensated for everything she had lost during the famine. So it really, you know, God can take anything and really turn it into a blessing. It's pretty amazing. But we have a couple of extra things we want to talk about in chapter 4, so we're going to start now in verse 38. And Elisha came again to Gilgal, and there was a dearth in the land, famine, and the sons of the prophets were sitting before him. And he said unto his servant, Set on the great pot, and seethe pottage for the sons of the prophets. And one went out into the field to gather herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered there wild gourds, his lap full, and came and shred them into the pot of pottage, for they knew them not. So they poured out for the men to eat, and it came to pass as they were eating of the pottage that they cried out and said, O thou man of God, there is death in the pot. And they could not eat thereof. And he said, Then bring meal, or flour, and he cast it into the pot, and he said, Pour out for the people that they may eat. And there was no harm in the pot. Now, men, do not make a joke about the cooking, okay? When you go home tonight or tomorrow and you find that there's a stew in front of you, don't cry out, There's death in the pot, okay? All right? We're just being biblical here, honey. We don't do that, okay? Don't try to be funny. It might not go well because she might throw something that's other than flour at you, okay? But we do have this miraculous event where there's this famine, and they're the sons of the prophets. Remember, these are students. These are guys under the mentorship, leadership of Elisha, and he says, we need to get some food going. And so one of them goes out and he takes these gourds, and evidently he didn't know what they was, and nobody else said anything against them either. So maybe they all thought, well, maybe this is good. And so he sliced them up and he puts them in the pot and they cook them up, and they're all, everybody's hungry. It's a famine. Okay? And so we have our own expressions that what we would eat if, whenever we've been so hungry. And so these guys are literally in that kind of situation. Yeah. Yeah, you got to watch what you get, all right? That's why guys like me don't do that. Okay? But I'll tell you this, too. I went to Aldi and got some mushrooms. That might not have been a good idea either, Charlie. Okay? Looking back on just that particular bunch that I got. I'm just saying. It happened. But yes, he goes out, he gets these gourds, he brings them back, they chop them up, they cook them up. These guys are eating, and something ain't right. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly how it evidenced itself, but it evidenced itself, and they said, this is not good. And so Elisha purifies the stew. All right? He does similar to remember the water at Jericho. There was bad water. They told him this is not good. It's causing all kinds of problems. So he called for a jar of salt, and then he threw the salt out and purified the water, and so people were able to drink. This time he calls for the flour and he casts it out, or puts it into the pot and says, "Now, give them to eat." And so they were actually able to eat. It wasn't the flour that purified it. It was God who purified it. It was him taking care of them, taking care of Elisha, and making sure that they were provided for, okay? And that's what this chapter ends with, is we're talking about provision from the Lord. The next one we look at in chapter 4, you might be reminded of a story in the ministry of Jesus. So let's look at that, verse 41. Verse 42. And there came a man from Baal Shalisha, and brought the man of God bread of the firstfruits, 20 loaves of barley, and full ears of corn, and the husk thereof. And he said, Give unto the people that they may eat. So it's the firstfruits offering, okay? The people were supposed to take this to the temple, all right? This would be a priestly provision. But remember, Israel's been cut off from Judah, right? The worship is not what it used to be. So this is a logical next thing to do for a faithful Hebrew in Israel. Take the offering of the first fruit to God's man, all right, Elisha. And so he takes the offering of the first fruit to them, because that's what that was going to be provided. It would be a provision for the priests if they had taken it down to Judah and to the temple. And there weren't any real most of the priests had left Israel. If you think back to whenever the split happened under Jeroboam and Rehoboam, at that time, a lot of the Levites and the priests left the northern kingdom to go to the southern kingdom, all right, which makes sense because they're bound to the temple. They're supposed to serve in the temple. They're supposed to minister around the temple, whether they're a priest or whether they're a Levite. And so they had left and went down south to serve and to live there. So there wasn't really any priestly families available like there had been in previous times. And so he does what he believes he can do in complying with the expectations of God, and brings this offering to Elisha. And Elisha tells him, hey, give this out to the guys so that they can eat. And his servitor said, What should I set this before 100 men? He said again, Give the people that they may eat, for thus saith the Lord, They shall eat and shall leave thereof. So he set it before them, and they did eat and left thereof according to the word of the Lord. So we have a miraculous provision through multiplication, right? They dole out the bread and the corn. It should not have been enough to feed 100 men. But miraculously, we have a multiplication that occurs, right? And so they're actually all able to eat, and they've got enough to eat to save. There's leftovers, okay? So we see God making miraculous provision for his faithful people. God does provide, okay? In the midst of a famine, God has a way of taking care of his people. He can remove the sting of death, and he can create abundance from faith. How true is that? How wonderfully true is that pictured here in these stories, right? And which are, I believe, historical accounts. When I say that they're stories, I don't want you to think that I find them in the least bit fictional. I don't. But we have these accounts for a reason. That was another thing me and Tom talked about. How wonderful God does at preparing people for Jesus. Okay? The Old Testament is full, chock full of illustrations and pictures and presentations that point directly to Christ. Who removes the sting of death? Jesus. Is that not what we read in 1 Corinthians? Oh, death, where is your sting? We don't have any problem. We have victory because of Jesus. We've been able to overcome death because of Jesus. What does he do? He takes care. He provides. He literally, in Jesus' ministry, we see him provide to a much greater degree with the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000. He's able to provide. We've seen it in our own lives. He knows what we have need of. And how many times have we heard testimony of, hey, I just felt like this was something I didn't think that I could do financially, but God was leading me to do. And somehow or another, there was money there every single month to do it. And I don't even know how he done it, but he did it. I've experienced that. We trust the Lord, and he provides. Now, questions or comments on that section before we dig into chapter 5? All right. If not, then let's roll on to chapter 5. Look at the first 14 verses. Now, Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. So we got this picture of a Syrian commander. All right, we've got a general over the Syrian army. I don't want to confuse with the Assyrians. Okay, so I don't want to. It's hard with the indefinite article. Anyways, but we have him. Naaman, also from Aram. He would be an Aramean. So if you'll see him referenced as such there. But he's very successful. He's a valiant man of war. He's skilled in battle, but he's a leper. Now, remember, having leprosy, this doesn't mean that it was automatically like Hansen's disease, okay, where things are falling off. The term leprosy in Scripture covers a variety of skin conditions. Eczema would fall under this, okay? So, and those kinds of things can be extremely debilitating. With the way that they irritate, the way that they itch, the issues that they cause. And so he was struggling with this. Now, the situation is that the Syrians, there's some groups of soldiers, they're going out on raids. And during the raid, they are able to capture a Hebrew girl from Israel, and they take her captive, and she ends up serving in Naaman's house, waiting on his wife. And this girl, verse 3, said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, that's Israel, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is in the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. Okay? Now, depending upon the quality, okay, if you converted this into modern day equivalencies, a talent, does anybody remember how much a talent weighs? Biblical trivia, 75 pounds. Okay? So he's got 10 talents of silver, 750 pounds of silver. All right? Today's market, that's like over $400,000 worth of silver. If it's top shelf silver, you know what I mean? The gold, 6,000 pieces. Now, we're unsure exactly of what this is. Some actually translate it as shekel. If it was a shekel, it's about 11 grams, okay? 66,000 grams of gold. And if it's great gold, we're talking about over $8 million worth of gold. When we combine the two, you get over $9 million worth of gold and silver, depending upon the quality and such in today's market, okay? So this is not some little amount of money. In addition to that, he's taken 10 changes of clothes, all right? And I'm sure that these were fancy clothes. These are nice garments. If he's bringing that much money, he ain't going to skimp on the shirt. You know what I'm saying? All right, he's going to bring some nice threads. And so he leaves with all that. And in addition to that, undoubtedly, he's got his entourage. Okay? A man like this who is valiant, who's the right-hand man to the king, who is a very successful commander of the army. He's going to have cronies. Okay? These guys are going with him. And he's got a letter from the king of Syria that he's carrying with him. And he brought the letter, verse 6, to the king of Israel, saying, Now, when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman, my servant, to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. Fix him. That's what the letter says. The Syrian king wrote to the Israel king. And it came to pass, when the king of Israel had read the letter, that he rent his clothes and said, Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. Who in the world does he think I am? Does he think I'm God? I can't take care of this guy's leprosy. This is the king of Syria looking to pick a fight with Israel. That's what it is. It's going to be justification for war. You didn't fix my general, I'm going to attack, is what he defaults to. All right, this would be Jehoram, and he is typically a negative Nancy. And so, verse 8, And it was so, when Elisha, the man of God, had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot, and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger unto him, saying, Go and wash in Jordan 7 times, and thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. But Naaman was wroth, and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me, and stand, and call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place, and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And his servants came near and spake unto him, and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee to do some great thing, wouldst thou not have done it? How much rather then, when he saith to thee, Wash and be clean? And he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. So, we have this story of the leprous, prosperous, victorious Aramean general, Naaman, who's highly favored by the king. And he's got all kinds of money. And he's bringing it down to Elisha. And he is going to get Elisha to get him better, because he is tired of dealing with this. I mean, undoubtedly, this guy had to be in such a physical state, an emotional state, and mental state of just desiring to be clean. And no longer be a leper, because he listens to the voice of this servant girl. There's a man of God that could fix this. Now, that servant girl seems like an insignificant character, right? Because we just read through the story. We get focused on Naaman. We get focused on all the money. We get focused on the threads. We get focused on Elisha. We get focused on all those things. But Naaman wasn't going to go to Israel if there hadn't been a servant girl that said something. That's pretty pivotal, ain't it? Now, she got carried off in a raid. She didn't wander up to Syria. It ain't like she said, Hey, you Arameans, can I hang out with you guys? I'm not really liking it in Israel anymore. They stole her. They kidnapped this girl, okay? She's missing home, undoubtedly. She ain't got her mama and her daddy no more. She ain't got none of the things that she's used to anymore. And she's serving Naaman's wife. And she says, Oh, that we were with the prophet in Samaria, because he could take care of Naaman. Such a small act causes a really big stir and a massive change. She's not an insignificant character. I love these kinds of people in the Bible. You know what I'm saying? Just those people, it's like 1-2 verses. But what they do in 1 or 2 verses, what God uses, what God does through them really is what I'm trying to get at. In that little bit, in that little choice, in those few words, is absolutely astounding and amazing, because so many times people feel like they are insignificant. They feel like they do not matter. They feel like everything that they work at and attempt in their life, it doesn't really amount to much in the grand scheme of things. But I would want to offer encouragement through individuals like this servant girl. You have no idea how much impact God is able to make with even the smallest faithful choice that you make. It's astounding to me. And you got Jehoram. Now, he's still a negative Nancy, okay? He panics, don't he? What did he do? This is the same guy. We talked about him not that long ago. What was the last thing we seen him doing? What did he panic about? Remember, he wanted to go fight. He wanted to go to war because there was a rebellion from Moab, because Moab was supposed to pay him, and they didn't pay him, and so he decided he was going to go teach them a lesson. So then he gets Jehoshaphat, right? And he says, hey, Jehoshaphat, why don't you come to war with me against Moab, because they're acting up, and I got to show them that I'm boss. And he says, sure. And they said, which way are we going to go? He said, we're going to go the long way around, all right? And we're going to take the long way around to attack them instead of going the shorter route. During the 7-day journey, right? They go out for all them days, and you've got Jehoram, Jehoshaphat, and the king of Edom, all right, who was a puppet king for Judah. All right, they were in control. Judah was over Edom. Moab was over, was ruled over by Israel. So you got these 3 kings, and they get out there, and they ain't got no water for all 3 armies and all the animals of the armies. They ain't got no water. And Jehoram says, God has done this. He's brought us out here so that we can all fall, so that these 3 kings can die at the hand of Moab. And Jehoshaphat says, calm down. Maybe we should actually see what God says before we just blame him. Elisha shows up. He's obviously in the assembly somewhere, and they go to him, right? Remember, they go down to him. And he promises, God's going to fill this area with water. You ain't going to hear the rain. You ain't going to see the clouds. This isn't something that you're going to witness physically until the water shows up. And the water fills, and there is enough water to take care of all the army and their animals and everything else. And then the next day, when the Moabites show up at the battle line, the sun is reflecting off of that water, and the lighting is such that it doesn't look like water. It looks like pools of blood. And they thought that those 3 kings got mad at each other and decided to fight each other. So they went into that battle not knowing it was a battle. They thought they were just going to go collect all the goods that all the dead guys left behind. They were going to take the spoil. So whenever they showed up and got close, next thing you know, there's 3 armies ready to fight. And they're well hydrated. Right? So, that's what Jehoram, there it is. Negative Nancy then, negative Nancy now. He's still upset. What's this king of Syria expect of me? Who am I? I'm not God. I'm not capable of doing this. He's just trying to pick a fight. And then we got Elisha, still getting used by God to evidence his existence and supremacy over all. Doesn't matter what's going on. Doesn't matter who the players are that are involved. It doesn't matter what the physical, economical situations may be. God is in control. If there's a famine, he's in control. If there's no famine but there's no water, he's in control. If there's a really mean king or a really great, he's in control. So God is over all of this. You can go to the next slide. Now, Naaman goes, the key, because Elisha hears how Jehoram is acting. Why in the world are you tearing your clothes? Send him to me. And so he does. And Naaman shows up with all of his pomp, with all of his attitude, and I mean that because I think he struggles, okay? Naaman struggles, I think, with humility in that he ain't got it. He's full of himself. Now, understandably so, okay? Lost people act lost, right? Okay, so we ought not be surprised when this guy shows up arrogant. He is head general. He's had a lot of victories in battle. Now, Scripture attributes it to God. God allowed him to have all those battles. Why? Because of what we already said. God is in control. Doesn't matter who, God is in control. So God's allowed him to have all these victories. Naaman don't know that, though. And so he's at the top of the ladder. I mean, he's right there with the king. The king wants Naaman to get better. He's willing to support him going to an enemy state in order to receive healing from a prophet of another God. So he's got some clout, okay, in society. He rolls up to Elisha's house, and he's got his chariot, he's got his horses, he's got his men. And what does Elisha do? Does Elisha blow the trumpet? Does Elisha roll out a red carpet? Does Elisha go out and greet everybody with bows and kisses of feet and all this stuff? No, he sends out a messenger. Hey, you, go tell Naaman to jump in the creek. Right? Go. I don't know this happened, but if I was the messenger, I'd be like, hold on a sec, boss. You want me to do what? You know who's out there. He don't look like a lightweight. He looks like he's mean. He got some energy about him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he looks like he goes into battle and he could take me. I'm a son of a prophet. Right? I'm just a schoolboy. I'm just being mentored. I didn't sign up to go poke the bear today. Go tell him, jump in the creek, and tell him to do it 7 times. Okay. You the boss. Mr. Naaman, Elisha says that you should go get in the Jordan River and dip and dunk under there 7 times. That's enough to make a man mad. Why? Because he expected respect. Surely I thought he would come out and meet me face to face. He expected religious ritual. I thought that surely he would put his hand over those spots and call out to his God, and that whenever the hand was removed, the spot would be healed. And I would receive immediate results at his hand, at his practice, the name of his God. He expected that to happen. And when he got there, his expectations were blown out of the water. He wasn't met with respect. He was met with a messenger. He don't even have the time to come talk to me face to face. Does he not know who I am? He's not even willing to invoke his God for me? I mean, does he know what I got? I got $9 million cash, baby. I've got tuxedos packed away. And he's not even going to give me the time of day to say a prayer to his God. I ain't paying for 7 washes in a dirty creek. There's far better water where I come from. There's much cleaner water. That old muddy water of the Jordan, I don't need to get in that mess. Have you guys looking at his men? You guys seen that water, right? It's gross. It ain't no count. But he wants me to jump in it. But here's the thing about Naaman. He has a characteristic about him, right? Now, part of it may be desperation, but there's a glimmer of hope, I think, at the very least. He is willing to listen to people who are underneath him. We see that first with the servant girl. But then we see it with his men, his servants that are with him. And they go to him humbly. They go to him respectfully. Okay? Here's the thing. There's a way to tell the truth and get the results that we need. Okay? There's a way to tell the truth and run people off. It ain't just what you say, it's how you say it. And that's an important lesson that most people need to learn. just in life. I just told them the truth. Yeah, but you said it mean, and they don't want to listen when you all hateful and ugly. Speak truth in love. I'm pretty sure that's in the Bible. Yes, that should be amen, Charlie, because it is in the Bible. I wasn't guessing. Speak truth in love. I don't think Jesus looked at those prostitutes and tax collectors and said, "You dirty, nasty heathens. You ain't nothing but ragged old sinners. You need to get right for the Lord. You need to believe He sent His Messiah, and that's me." That's what is that how you think Jesus spoke to them people? Okay, then what makes us think we can talk to one another like that? Well, that's just my personality. Then it needs to get redeemed. Because you ain't better than Jesus, nor am I. Ain't just what we say, is how we say it. Now, these guys give us a lesson in that, and they're pagans. They're pagans. My father, look, if he had told you to do some really big thing, maybe take that $9 million and set it on the altar of his God. Now, they don't go into all this, but something big like this. You take that $9 million and you set it on the altar of his God, and then you go and you scale this big old mountain, and then you sit up there and you fast for 4 days, and then you come back down the mountain, and then you go through this other ritual, and then boom. If he had asked you something, would you not have done it? Then why won't you listen whenever he just says to go get in some water and get washed and get clean? And Naaman says, well, when you put it like that. But see, here's the thing. God, I believe, saw into Naaman's heart. There's potential there. God knows the heart of man. He knows the hard ones. And He knows the ones that are hardened, but they can be softened. And God works in mysterious ways to teach us important lessons. And it started with a messenger instead of a prophet. And it's going to the Jordan instead of some beach vacation off the coast of Cancun. And so Naaman goes and dips himself in that dirty water 7 times. And when he comes up, his skin is like a child's, and he's healed. So many times people desire something so badly. They want things, they see these situations, they want changes, they want this, they want that, but they won't ever humble themselves before God. They just won't do it. And they won't get humble like He tells them to. I don't know how it works. I wish I could explain it to you in better words, but I can't. I do not know how it works, but what I can affirm is that even in the deepest, darkest times of your life, if you'll get humble before God, He'll take care of it. I don't know how. And it's going to look different from one person to the next, because our God don't work the same all the time. He ain't bound by ritual. He ain't bound by circle. He's above it all. But if you go to Him humbly, He's there. But when you go to Him haughty, it's hard. Pharaoh hardened his heart, and then God hardened his heart. Okay? Naaman had a soft spot. So God teaches him a lesson. It goes against Naaman's expectations. It does challenge his ego, and it teaches him the truth about this amazing God. So Naaman has that willingness. He listens, and because he gets humbled and he follows the directions that are from the Lord, because this is God's word to Naaman via Elisha and his messenger, but it's still the word of the Lord. He's healed of his leprosy. You can go to the next slide. You can go to the next one. There we go. Oh, okay. 15:27. Ooh, it's 10 till. All right, just a little bit of it. We won't go all the way. And he returned, verse 15, to the man of God. He returned to the man of God. So Naaman's come back to Elisha's house. He and all of his company, and came and stood before him. So now there's no messengers. They're seeing each other. Stood before him and said, Behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. There's only one God coming from a pagan in Syria. Okay? Ancient culture, ancient times, multiple gods. But he said, I pray thee take a blessing of thy servant. But he said, As the Lord liveth, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. And Naaman says, Please, you've got to take this. I have all this silver, I have all this gold, I have all these clothes. You've got to take it. Your God is absolutely amazing, and I believe that there's none other God. It isn't that he's the greater God. It isn't that he's the stronger God. It isn't that, no. There's no other God. None. He's given up all the other gods in his life, all the other gods of all the lands that he's conquered, all the gods of the land that he grew up with. He's given up all of it. He said, there's only one God, and it's the God of Israel. I got to show my appreciation. Take this. And Elisha says, no, I can't take that. Why? Well, you learn later. It's not appropriate. It's not the time for me to be taking goods for the work of God. It's not time for us to do that. That you wanted to make sure that there was no negative connotation to the work of God, because you have a Syrian general, an Aramean guy who's high ranking, who has a whole lot of money, and then he comes and he gives this to Elisha, and this miracle happens. It may give a bad perspective, like, Elisha could be bought. And people did that. If you don't remember, you can go back to Balaam. All right, you can go and read about Balaam, who was bought, and Balaam comes off all pious. I can only say what God tells me to say, okay? But God thwarts him, and he's only able to pronounce blessing over the people of Israel. And whenever he can't pronounce a curse, because that's what he's been paid to do, when he can't pronounce a curse, instead he gives them evil wisdom. If I can't pronounce a curse on them, I'll tell you how you can get them. You send your women in there to their men, all right? These non-Hebrew pagan women, and you'll thwart the people of Israel through that. And that's what they did. So buying a prophet isn't a new idea. And I think Elisha did not want to be portrayed as that. Plus, Elisha trusted God to take care of him. He just watched him take the first fruit offering and multiply it miraculously, did he not? He knew he'd be okay. So, I can't take it. He refused it. And Naaman said, Shall there not then, I pray thee, be given to thy servant 2 mules' burden of earth? For thy servant will henceforth offer neither burnt offering nor sacrifice unto other gods, but unto the Lord. In this thing the Lord pardon thy servant, that when my master goeth into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leaneth on my hand, I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow down myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon thy servant in this thing. And he, being Elisha, said unto him, being Naaman, Go in peace. So he departed from him a little way. So you get this strange thing that happens, because he tells Naaman, or Naaman tells Elisha, you need to take the money. And Elisha says, no, I'm not going to take the money, I promise. God, as long as God's living, I'm not touching that. Okay, well then let me make a request. I need 2 mule loads worth of dirt, because I'm not going to offer sacrifice ever again to any other God except the God of Israel. Now that seems strange, okay? But remember, he's new to this, okay? And he has what I will call an incomplete theology. Ancient thought and ancient theology in pagan lands saw gods as being territorial. They belong to the land, right, of those people. So it's like the God of Israel, okay, the gods of Egypt. They're in these areas, okay? That's where they rule. That's where they reign. So what he's saying is, I'm going to take some, if I can't be in Israel, but I'm going to take some of Israel with me. And I'm going to establish an altar on this dirt to offer sacrifices to this God, and only this God. Now, ain't that amazing? It's incomplete theology, okay? I get it. But Elisha says, go in peace. Everybody's going to know that Naaman doesn't worship any other God. He says, now listen, I'm asking for some grace here, because my job requires me to go into the house of Rimmon, which is like a war god for Syria. It requires me to take the king into there. And when I bow down in there, I'm just asking that I be forgiven of that. This is a responsibility of my job, and I got to go in there. I got to go in there with the king. But I'm not worshiping that God. I'm only offering sacrifices to the God of Israel. I'm only worshiping the God of Israel. He's got incomplete theology, but he's got a heart filled with faith in the God of Israel and a desire to only serve him. And here's what's the thing. With a guy like Naaman, who takes 2 mule loads full of dirt and builds an altar to another god, everybody's going to know who he's worshiping, including the king. Hey, Naaman, why don't you offer a sacrifice to your God on my behalf? You know what I mean? These conversations are going to come up. He's not ridiculed. He's not cast aside. Elisha simply says, go in peace. Yes. I believe I'll see Naaman. I do. I believe I'll see Naaman. And for clarification, I believe I'll be in heaven when I see him. Let me put it that way, just in case there was some curiosities there. I do. I believe it. He was granted peace. He says, I only want to worship God. He's extended grace. God is patient, God is gracious, and God is kind. This man, he let go of every other God in his life. Desired only the one. Now, his plea of ignorance, we can't just use that as some kind of license, though, okay? This would be a cautionary warning about misapplication of Scripture, okay? I think what we're given is a picture of grace and forbearance that God possesses towards individuals, especially Gentiles in this dispensation of time, okay? This is a non-Hebrew pagan who's come to him, okay, and had to go back. All right, so it's a completely different dispensation. We have the benefit of the canon of Scripture. We have a whole Bible, free access to it. You can download it for free on your phone. You can literally take it with you everywhere you go. We know what Christ teaches about freedom of worship, but the expectation of worship in spirit and truth. We understand the expectations of God in the character of the life of the Christian because he's made it clear in black and white. Okay, so we have something Naaman didn't. It ain't like he had a pocket reference on how to be a Hebrew. So we have a great blessing. So don't misapply that about Naaman and try to morph it into something, or let somebody try to morph it into something. That's just a cautionary tale. So I love this account. I love the story of Naaman. We are not done with it, but we are done with it for tonight. Okay? We'll come back to it next week. Make sure there's nothing on that slide. Yeah. All right. Now, if there's no questions or comments,